right, we're live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's Monday, and that means it's time for another episode of Just Shilling. And I am super pumped to have another incredible guest in Patrick Young from Galxe here. And before we do get into it, folks, just want to let everyone know that nothing that we discuss is going to be considered to be financial advice. The opinions that we share are of our own and do not necessarily represent our organizations respectively. And we won't get into anything that's probably too spicy or controversial for family dinner during the holidays. But I am so psyched to have Patrick here and pumped to share with the audience a little bit about his journey, everyone that's tuning in live and everyone that will come and be able to check this video out later on. So let's get into it, Patrick. First and foremost, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you giving us your time today, and so much to uncover in such a fast-paced industry, no doubt. And a lot's even changed since the last time we've had our conversation. So this space moves at a million miles a second. But before we do get into it, let's give everyone that 30-second minute elevator pitch about who you are and the company that you represent and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Patrick. I run go-to-market and ecosystem for Galxe. Galxe is a Web3 growth and ecosystem development platform. So we cover the wide expanse of all of the work that you could be involved in from a partner perspective on managing your engagement with your ecosystem, handling your data analytics side of the equation, both on and off chain, managing asset distribution, digital identity, AI, and a handful of other things in creating this really universal platform for teams to use to basically be able to grow and sustain their communities, their marketing presence, and otherwise through the Galaxy platform. Now, outside of that, I spent the last 4 years or so at Chainlink Labs, where I was leading the Web3 commercial business, working with all of the different blockchains and protocols and how they interact with Chainlink products at the time from a critical infrastructure perspective. So very excited to be here, Trevor. I appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah. So that's a quite the interesting journey from Chainlink to Galaxy. So what was it that drew you to the opportunity and kind of bring us back to, what was going on in your mind then, what the space was like, and, really how does what Galaxy is doing in Web3 really kind of align with your personal mission?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from a personal perspective, I think there's a lot of opportunities still out there to, play a critical role in providing the solutions that are required for teams to onboard that next, let's call it million or billion users that we're looking to achieve in this space. And a lot of that comes down to how do you choose the right pieces of infrastructure to make your application successful, to make your application provide as much utility as possible to the users that you want to work with and that you're targeting from a utility perspective. Now, when it came to Chainlink, I was working a lot on those same problems from a critical infrastructure standpoint when it came to cross-chain communication, data requirements, automation, the randomness, and a handful of other areas as well. And that's really where I saw a lot of parallels with the work that Galaxy was doing. Now, Chainlink was a little more involved on the back office, the work that was done from a data perspective in most
Yeah.
cases. But when it came to Galaxy, definitely saw a lot of parallels with the work that was being done, but at a different layer of that development stack from a partnerships perspective, working more on the ecosystem development, engagement, data intelligence level to ensure that teams are building the right products to target the right users, that they're continuing to engage with their communities, driving that type of long-term participation, and helping to educate folks on the work that they're being those individual teams are doing. I also thought it was pretty interesting from my own perspective in terms of the challenges and the work that I like to be involved in. When I first joined Chainlink, primarily focus at the time on data and specifically being
Yeah.
a data oracle and really helping to drive that initial growth of the DeFi summer and everything that we experienced on the DeFi level. And over those 4 years, really saw that transformation and participated in that transformation from a single service provider for a singular product to a holistic platform of critical infrastructure. So expanding from data to compute to cross-chain communication and randomness, like I mentioned. And when I had the opportunity to join Galaxy, I saw a very similar transformation that was taking place in that most people had well understood Galaxy as a questing provider. So, certainly that is still a critical part of our business, but that was really where they had gotten their start in the market. And Galaxy has since, however, been expanding very aggressively into a variety of other verticals in that effort of creating a holistic platform to provide marketing and ecosystem development services. And what that looks like is providing kind of complementary or parallel services that are critical in that process and in that function. So things like digital identity with Galaxy Passport and Galaxy Score, KYC and non KYC identity services respectively that have about 1.5 million users across those two areas. Galaxy Earn Drop for asset distribution, and then continuing to expand. We have a couple of other interesting things that are coming up pretty quickly here. But again, a very similar path on this transformation from singular product to holistic platform. And at the end of the day, those are pretty interesting challenges and opportunities I like to work on, and serves a similar focus in creating as much utility as possible for this ecosystem to onboard that next wave of users and create as much utility as possible in the process.
That's fantastic. And one of the things that I was really interested in is being that your platform is great for being able to help projects kind of engage with users through these challenges or tasks that come up with reward participation as well too. So do you think that some web3 projects are really kind of missing out by not leveraging the full range of tools that are available to them, and kind of help us explain or understand really kind of where they're falling short right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question honestly speaks for itself in a lot of ways, in the sense that people understand in many instances Galaxy as that questing service for those reward-based loyalty programs, those individual interactions that you can set campaigns around, incentivize if you like, for on-chain or off-chain participation. That being said, we've really worked diligently to expand into this holistic platform of services that encompasses, like I mentioned, everything from yes questing, but also token distribution, modular AI, sophisticated on and off chain data analytics, and much more. And really creating this holistic platform where, as a partner, you can look at Galaxy as your one stop shop to help you grow and maintain and retain your community engagement, your mind share in the market, and more. And I do think you see a lot of teams that are increasingly leveraging that holistic platform approach. And they're certainly positioned to be very successful. I think there's a lot of opportunity for those teams and for others in the market, those listening, to say, hey, if I want to not only handle the questing side of the equation, but I also want to ensure that I'm handling civil resistance or graded functionality through identity management, outfitting with more comprehensive AI tooling. If I am looking for deeper and rich data analytics on both on and off chain participation, that's where Galaxy really does come into play to say, we can help you manage your growth and intelligence through any stage of your development process, whether you're coming out of stealth or whether you're a well established team that is just looking to regularly ensure that you are targeting the right folks, you're engaging the right way, and you're building a sustainable community while you build your product.
Fantastic. And as you mentioned, right, we know that your platform is helping these projects with user engagement, but as you mentioned, it's a lot more than that. And I think that more recently, you guys have been even more aggressive in trying to expand the offerings to a wider range of individuals. But what do you think is something, Patrick, that most people still might misunderstand about what you offer, and how do you really kind of explain that to like the broader impact that you're trying to achieve overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people see, in some instances, see questing as, Galaxy's primary, business model or primary business that it plays a role in
And for
today.
those, and just for those
Yeah.
2, they may never have heard of the word questing before. So maybe if you can break that down a little bit to its even rudimentary form of what that even means.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in its simplest form, questing is a way of setting up as a partner a campaign for driving participation, education, and involvement for a specific ecosystem, platform, or product. So, from a partner's perspective, you can use a questing tool in Galaxy Quest to set up a series of activations for users and end users to participate in, to fulfill, in order to be involved in the community, in order to understand and become more involved with a product, get your hands-on experience with everything that the team is itself working on. Now, with that, it's an opportunity to directly incentivize that type of participation by saying, hey, if you are one of these long-term users that has regularly participated, has fulfilled all of these different activations, there is that opportunity to take meaningful ownership over the effectively incentive side of things, with token incentives, loyalty points,
Mm,
NFTs, otherwise, all issued through one universal interface, if you will. And then from a user's perspective, you have an opportunity to get familiar with those ecosystems, and through that process better understand that given project, ecosystem or otherwise, and really become directly involved in the development, the feedback loop that exists for those teams. So it's an extremely helpful tool. That being said, it's just a one tool in the toolkit that Galaxy provides. And if there was one misconception to your earlier point, I'd say it is that Galaxy provides Galaxy Quest, whereas the reality is Galaxy is not just a tool, but in reality a full end-to-end Web3 services platform for
yes.
ecosystem development, growth, ecosystem engagement, marketing. All of these different areas. It's a very interesting set of challenges, but a universal problem or universal platform for fulfilling all of those different activations. Like I mentioned, modular AI, you have identity management, you have asset distribution, you have all of these different tools at your disposal, so that not only can you manage interactions through one of the products with Galaxy Quest, but you can also manage that end-to-end life cycle of guiding engagement, understanding the data analytics behind that, having handling your asset distribution, handling the education process through
Yeah.
comprehensive content development, through AI guidance, AI copilot solutions, any number of different areas. So it's really a misconception, or the other way of looking at it is Galaxy is that real one-stop shop and critical layer for teams in the Web3 space to handle all of their ecosystem development at scale.
Yeah, and so many teams are choosing Galaxy for helping out in a multitude of different options as you just mentioned. I think that the last time I checked, over 71,000 different partners. So when it comes to that as well, too, Patrick, how do you, with all of the interest, how do you become selective in determining which partners to sponsor or to even work with? Is there any kind of thing that you're using criteria to determine where's your best energy being spent so that it's mutually beneficial, not for only you as the company but for the company that you're partnering with as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer all of these solutions in a self-service format. So teams today, and this is where you see all of a lot of that seamless adoption come from, is teams today can onboard with Galaxy, can set up a space, can onboard with the different tooling that they require to help guide their marketing and their ecosystem development in that sense. That being said, like you mentioned, it's a personal responsibility of ours to say, hey, how can we identify a select number of teams that we want to regularly engage with, that we want to identify, proactively approach, that we are going to have a deeper level of strategic involvement with. I think there's a couple different ways of looking at that. There is one basket, which is the already well established teams that, it's a more regular kind of, hey, how do we ensure that with your pole position in the market, you're continuing to drive long term participation, that you're continuing to make advancements, that we're continuing to highlight the right things, that we're continuing to drive those type of engagements so that we can fulfill basically the onboarding process for that next wave of users in that aspect. I think there's another bucket on top of that which we take a pretty proactive approach in, which is going out and identifying teams that are doing things new in the interest, new and interesting in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And for us, it comes down to, if we want to onboard that next, billion users into the space, not only do we have to work with those pole position, well established teams to make sure they're continuing to push forward in their efforts, but we need to make sure that the teams that are building things that are new, that are exciting, that take a unique approach to a different problem in the space, create a different level of utility or different aspect of utility for end users, fulfilling a niche, that we are proactively working with them to better understand what they're working on and form a more long-term strategic plan for how are we going to drive their engagement, because it is going to create real world utility for new users, for existing users, and more.
This is a really great segue because keeping people engaged in this industry is rather tough. So what's really been your approach, not only you personally, but as an organization, to kind of making sure that these users stick around for long term? There's so much noise, there's always a shiny new toy for someone to get attracted to. So, what's your focus on keeping kind of things succinct?
Yeah, so if I were to give advice to the broader ecosystem and the folks that we work with today, it is about communicating, on one hand, communicating vision, and on the other hand, delivering real world value and utility as early and as
Yeah,
often as possible.
yeah,
On the communication front, it's about very early and then very regularly communicating with your audience, with your early participants, with prospective new participants in your ecosystem, and defining and communicating what type of value you serve for them, where you want to go with the project, what type of niche you're fulfilling in the market, and how are you doing things differently or better than alternatives that already exist. For us, as an example, we have been very clear around we are building this holistic platform for ecosystem engagement, for data intelligence, for automation, for marketing, universally speaking, for Web3 growth. And our primary purpose with that and our primary vision is to help with that onboarding process for that next billion users into the ecosystem itself. Now, from a value perspective and delivering value to teams, it's important that naturally to retain healthy communities, you need to make sure that not only are you pairing your vision and the future promise of the work that you're involved in, but you start to deliver on that value. And unfortunately, we see that a lot in the day, in the space today. We see that with whether it be the DeFi sector, gaming, some of the work that's being done in AI, that people have an opportunity to really get hands-on experience with applications, understand where they're providing value, understand how it is better than a centralized or Web2 alternative, and that's a very powerful tool to ensure that naturally people are going to be involved in your ecosystem. That being said, there is an aspect of making sure that you do have a very clear plan in mind that says we are going to expand on this suite, we are going to expand on this vision. This isn't the end game because we're still in a really early and developing industry, holistically speaking.
mm,
So I'll kind of make the Galaxy comparison again there, which is we originally started with Galaxy Quest, which is a very helpful tool for these teams to engage with and for users to engage with different ecosystems. That being said, if we're going to help onboard that next billion users into the ecosystem, we need to ensure that we're building scalable, secure, feature-rich infrastructure for asset distribution, for data analytics, for AI, for identity
yeah.
management, and more. And that's why we've taken this approach of continuously and regularly expanding to that suite in a way that's purpose driven and it's fulfilling real world value for both our partners and for the end users that we work with.
I love that. I love that. And this is a really good segue as well too. In your personal experience, what do you think is like the biggest mistake that some new projects make when they're trying to build a community? That's something that really drove me to wanting to get into this industry in the first place. Was it was like that really rich sense of community, and with so many different projects and all these different partners you have, a community in one area, it's completely different from building a community in another one. So, what are some of those mistakes that you can that kind of come to mind for you, and how can we help maybe some of these new projects avoid making those mistakes?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest missed opportunities in development, and you can see this with some teams that take this very seriously and that are very successful as a result, and then others that might miss this entirely, is the aspect of community-driven development effectively. Understanding
Mm,
how your community and ecosystem is both engaged in your progress of development, engaged with your individual applications, your protocol products, and the services that you provide, but also where they're looking for changes, where the feedback or helping to effectively solve that feedback loop that exists for those different products and services. I think many teams can miss that when it comes down to how do you actually kick off that feedback loop, how do you actually drive that underlying engagement, and how are you interpreting the data as a result to help make proper adjustments excuse me, make proper adjustments to your strategies, to your development process, and otherwise. Really, I think at the end of the day, you know, what it comes down to is are you kicking off the right types of engagement with your ecosystem? Are you driving them in a way that's going to enable them on your work that you're involved in? are they better understanding of your product, or are they using that as kind of a binary input output? Are they saying, hey, I might want to participate in this ecosystem, just because it might be something new? Or are they actually getting deeply involved, understanding the work that you're involved in, understanding the nuances of the product, of the ecosystem, of the mission that you're on in the ecosystem? And if they are able to do so, then they have an opportunity to become deeper and deeper involved, very deeply involved in your development. They become more attached to your community. They want to see your success, and they feel like it's a shared success because they're actively contributing to it. For
Hmm.
us, it comes down to, how do we develop the tooling that effectively services that? So that's why we put together the Galaxy platform, is, allowing teams to very easily understand what type of participation they should be targeting, what type of how they should be interpreting the data that results from active participation, whether it be on or off chain, and how do they, need to manage in a very strategic way all of those different major milestones in their development.
Hmm, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to kind of, get to the team a bit here while we have the time and talk a little bit about, just what makes it special, why out of all the places, obviously, that you've chosen to stay there and continue to build, help us understand a little bit more about your team, some dynamics, and just kind of some of the inner workings that makes it really interesting and fun to work there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that stood out very clearly when I was first, had the opportunity to work with the Galaxy team is just at the end of the day, how incredibly talented and driven the team is, how committed they are to this vision of onboarding that next billion users into the Web3 ecosystem. Now, Galaxy is a pretty well-known brand in the space today, and it's not uncommon, or actually very common, for our broader team to be active participants, to say, "Hey, this is, I got my gateway into this ecosystem. I better understood the value that these different parts or categories of the industry can provide through Galaxy as my initial introduction, as my portal to the Web3 environment." And as a result, you have a very strong attachment from the broader team to say, we have something here that is really going to drive that next wave of adoption. And the level of motivation and commitment that exists from the team is very inspiring. So that was one thing that certainly stood out. I think the other, again, going back, is just the mission itself. It is, we are basically serving as that spearhead into Web3 adoption. And so our work with in any of our given existing verticals today, some of the areas that we're expanding, as well as the work that we do in not just Web3 but in Web2, all serve a very similar purpose, which is, we need to go out there and help identify and proactively outfit those teams with the best leading infrastructure for them to become successful as possible. And if we're able to do so, that is going to certainly help chip away at that end goal of saying we want to make sure that this is a environment in which Web3 is underpinning many of our day-to-day interactions, whether it be finance or otherwise. And so mission is one. I think the level of commitment and absolute talent that exists on the team is extremely inspiring too.
Fantastic. And with all the changes, there's just so much going on in the space. And I think that we'll definitely, talk a little bit about AI and some other trends that are kind of converging with blockchain, crypto, and Web3. But, how do you and the rest of your team personally just kind of keep up with the all the information that's coming at us at just like every second? It seems like something's changing, and if you miss a day in this space, it feels like you missed a year in another industry respectively. So how do you personally kind of just stay level-headed and kind of avoid some of the noise but still keep that really keen ear to make sure that you're not missing anything that could be revolutionary or really impact what you guys are trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's personal practices around, again, like you said, making sure that you are, focused on the critical work at hand. How are we working on a, day-to-day basis to outfit these teams to give them the best solutions that they require for them to become successful, and really, cancel out the noise as much as possible on a day-over-day basis. I think there's, a lot going on, so it's easy to
Mhm.
get distracted. Some of the tools that I think are very helpful in that process, X can be a double-edged sword in
Yeah.
terms of the amount of content that comes with you versus the amount of noise that comes into your feed. That being said, I think it's about making sure your feed is populated with those folks that are providing regular updates on the work that's being involved, the new and inspiring teams that are being involved. And honestly, you could use in many ways Galaxy as a proxy for that, in the sense that Galaxy is regularly working with these teams and making sure that they're positioned for success. So there is an aspect of that, and just saying, hey, let's follow where the work is being done, where the innovation is being done, and Galaxy is a great source for that. I think another one that's important to call out that I think is really interesting is in this aspect of AI. One of the developments that we've had internally here is Galaxy's release of Alva. Now, Alva is an AI copilot solution that is specifically geared for Web3 engagement or Web3 knowledge and ecosystem dynamics at play. And
Mm,
so, as a user, you can use Alva for things like better understanding why market behavior exists, helping to infer kind of macroeconomic dynamics that exist at play, political things that are happening in the market, as well as core developments to understand how is the market evolving on an ongoing basis. The other is teams like ourselves will use that as a regular daily download that says, hey, here is the work that's being done across the broader ecosystem. Here are the things to be aware of. Because it's important for us to make sure that we have that regular, ongoing intelligence that's coming into the system for us to make sure we're on the front foot at all times.
yeah, no, that's really good. And in terms of the next big trend in this industry, you know, what are you all thinking about? Is there anything in particular right now that's like you're super excited about? And I know that you don't have a crystal ball. I wish that we all did, but what are some things that you're kind of getting ready for? How are you trying to get ready for that, prepared to still continue to lead in this space?
Yeah, I think a couple that stand out that are probably the most interesting to me right now would be, first, the evolution of tokenized assets, real world
Mm,
assets. We started a couple of years back with seeing things even, 5, 6 years back with, different enterprises, institutions putting, Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And that was about the depth of involvement that they had. Really, what you're seeing today through work that's being done across the ecosystem is more of a more deep involvement within Web3, given the efforts behind tokenized assets, real world assets. I think that's only going to continue to grow. It's only going to open up more opportunity for the intersection between Web 2 and Web 3, traditional finance, DeFi, all of these different areas. And so I think that's certainly an area to keep an eye on, and something that's going to only continue to create value for the ecosystem at large. The next area I think that is most interesting is probably the convergence of AI and blockchain. Now, when it comes to AI, there are a lot of concerns that exist around things like, centralization that exists from a handful of major cloud providers that can exercise control, bias because they operate with a black box system, or you don't feel
mm,
that you can really understand how things are being interpreted, how outputs are
yeah.
being created, and you really have to just trust the system. There's also a lot of other concerns from localized execution environments that exist for AI around like specific use cases. Healthcare is an example, and how do you manage that in a way that is secure, that is protected, and that again can operate as a critical piece of infrastructure for those teams or for those ecosystems or those parts of the industry. Um, when it comes to blockchain, it does serve a very valuable purpose to open up the or to ensure that AI can operate in a completely trustless environment in a way in which users can operate without having to trust centralized entities, centralized providers, or those that might be able to exert control or bias within the system. So I think AI is only going to continue to be a very big aspect of the work that's done in blockchain, and that's one that I think I'm particularly excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, wrapping it up here, I wanted to get the opportunity for you to share some things that may be coming up on your roadmap. Anything in particular, any feature or tool that you're super excited about, maybe that you want to make sure that the audience is aware of, and then really kind of close it out on terms of where you are right now. I believe that you are growing as well too. So maybe just share with the audience. There may be some viewers here that are interested in joining your team. What are some green flags? What are some red flags? And some mistakes that they could potentially avoid if they're trying to become involved, even if it's just working with you guys or trying to contribute or volunteer even in some capacity.
Yeah, so I think on the growing side of things, we continue to grow on every day. We have a very core principle, which is we want to find the best talent at all times. We want to make sure we're bringing in folks that are very inspired by the work that we do, that understand our mission that we're on to onboard that next wave of users, understand the role that Galaxy serves. I think Generally speaking, when it comes to the Web3 ecosystem or the Web3 space, it's about having that kind of startup and self starter mentality is a big one. Those are the green flags that I look for, folks that are really comfortable working in an ever changing, fast paced environment where not everything is going to be clear on a day over day basis or week over week basis, or
Yeah.
who knows what's going to happen in 6 months. But really understand and actually be able to thrive in that environment of ambiguity that might exist. Um, I think, yeah, outside of that, on the product side of things, we have a lot of exciting things on the horizon. Next week, we're going to have a very large product launch. So I think everybody, both if you are an end user or if
Yeah.
you're a partner of ours, be very excited. It really feeds into the work that we do around the data analytics, the data intelligence layer, and ensuring that you have sustainable long term participation in your ecosystem and that you as a user are able to be involved and interact on an ongoing basis in a way that is recognized, that allows you to set yourself apart from the other users maybe in that system.
Yeah, and in terms of partnerships as well too, I mean, you guys are doing some really cool ones. Do you ever come into the situation where, people try to partner with you, but you just don't feel it's aligned? And like, how are you even choosing those partnerships as well too? Is there any kind of criteria that you use for that? And I feel like a lot of partnerships announcements have been kind of used for like engagement in the past before,
Mhm.
and that they really didn't have a lot of like meat to it, right? So help us explain a little bit kind of what goes into the criteria with those partnerships that you're trying to build.
Yeah, absolutely. So we operate a self-service platform. So in many areas, people can come and use the system as they see fit to fulfill their individual objectives. Where it differs is when we look to establish those deeper strategic partnerships. To your point,
Yeah.
the work that is involved there, yeah, there are absolutely examples or in scenarios where we feel that their interests might not be as well aligned with ours, and we decide that that's not something that we want to participate in, that we want to form that deeper relationship with. That being said, you'll find more often than not the work that that we are involved in is very much so aligned with a lot of different teams, whether you be major media outlets in Web 2, such as Forbes that uses Galxe, or some of these other teams in Web 3 that are well established. We're all on the same mission to help create value for the ecosystem, so much so that it attracts not only, creates not only value for the existing users, but attracts new usage from outside of the Web3 landscape. In those scenarios, it's relatively easy for us to pinpoint when there's an opportunity to work with somebody in a very strategic way. But if there is misalignment, then it's typically something that we would avoid, certainly.
Yeah, not just doing it just because you can, making sure that
Yep.
you're making the right choice. That's awesome. Leaving it out here, closing out rather, Web3 can be quite overcoming for newcomers. So, with your experience, I would consider you to be like an OG in the space. You've been here for several years. What are some of words of wisdom that you could potentially share with people that are newcomers to the space, kind of crypto curious, or even those that are skeptical about kind of what the potential of this industry are?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is go seek out where utility exists today as a way of understanding the value that it's going to create, not only in the current state, but in a future state. So I think DeFi is a great example of this, where today there is more valuable alternatives that exist within the DeFi landscape than exist in the Web2 alternatives, where you can go and participate in lending and borrowing with the likes of Aave as an example, and understand that rather than having to go through a lengthy onboarding process within a traditional financial institution, you can go and start to participate in that exchange, if you will. A good example there would be, hey, I can go and loan out my money at a much higher interest rate, if actually a much higher yield than you would certainly get from putting your money in a bank account. Go out, start to experience where the value exists today, and it'll help you contextualize where this space is going, and it'll help to connect the dots around a lot of the work that's being done. Again, I think Galaxy, maybe a little bit biased, but I think Galaxy is an excellent instrument to do that,
Yeah.
just given that we consolidate a lot of that work that's being done in a very comprehensive way so that you have a guided experience, a guided walkthrough through the work that's being done across any given team that is working within the broader crypto landscape.
Fantastic. And in terms of conferences, any that you guys are going to be going to in the near future, there may be some people that will be there as well too. And what's the best way that folks can continue to follow all of the awesome things that you're doing? And if anyone interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of following the work that we're involved in, staying up to date, I think there's a couple great instruments for that. There is Galxe.com, that is our website and connection to the app, so that you can actually go see all the work that we're involved in, get a better understanding for the Galaxy platform, and actually participate in some of these ecosystems, as well as from a partner's perspective, can go and start to toy around, kick the tires on ways that you might want to leverage the Galaxy platform at a deeper level. Then we have things like X. So certainly at Galaxy on X is a great way of just staying up to date on all things Galaxy related. So we have, certainly the work that we do with our partners, being featured there in a very curated fashion, but we also have all of the work that's being done from a development perspective being highlighted on that channel.
Nice.
Lastly, I think if you want to reach out to me, a great instrument would be X. I'm always reading my DMs. Feel free to message me at any time. So that's Pat K Young on X. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us through our website. No shortage of ways to get in contact with the team.
Fantastic. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. Really, really enjoy your time, Patrick, and sharing your insights with our audience. So, folks, we will get some short clips of this conversation. We'll get that full episode up on YouTube and really appreciate everyone for your time. You could be doing anything in the world on this Monday, but you chose to share it with us. And stay tuned for some more incredible guests and upcoming episodes of Just Shilling. But once again, Patrick, thank you so much for your time. And everyone in the audience, have a great day. Take care. Bye,
Thanks, Trevor.
guys.
Cheers.